Eddy couldn't believe what he was seeing, but it was true. John Gardner, his deceased teacher aide, was actually alive and well. Mr. Gardner? He stuttered in disbelief. Yep, it's me, he said with a shrug. I'm a wizard. Last person you'd expect, I think. But Eddy was still too bewildered to even think straight. On one hand, he was relieved to high heaven to see Mr. Gardner alive and well. On the other hand, he was completely confused. I don't get it. How are you alive? A sly smirk spread across the mage's face as he said, Oh, you only saw what I wanted my enemies to see. Come, I'll tell you everything. Eddy followed Mr. Gardner into a kitchen. He sat down on one end of the table on a wooden seat, while Mr. Gardner stood in front of the kitchen bench. Would you like anything? He asked Eddy. No thanks, I just had some hot chocolate from Ellen. Oh. Gardner let out a slightly dismayed sigh. He looked at Ellen just as he was about to sit down at the table himself. You always beat me to the punch there. Ellen just smiled. Who doesn't like hot chocolate? Eddy cut into the conversation. His mind was fixated on getting answers from Gardner. So, you can see spirits too? That's right, Gardner nodded. Including your friend over there. Eddy turned his head to Artie. The owl's eyes were as wide as baseballs. You're the Spectre? He bellowed. Oh, did I forget to mention that? More like who omitted it. You didn't know? Eddy asked. No, I did not. Artie's tone was a mixture of anguish, annoyance, and curiosity. Wait a minute, if you were the Spectre, does that mean you could see the other spirits back at school, including me? Yes, actually. And you pretended not to? I'm a really good actor. And then Gardner changed the subject. But for now, I think we should cut to the chase. He sat down at the other end of the table and faced Eddy directly. You deserve to know the truth. Eddy took a deep breath and asked Mr. Gardner, What happened? I saw you die. Yeah, tell us. Artie was on the verge of begging for an answer. It takes a lot to surprise me. Mr. Gardner took a deep breath and spoke. You saw a double of me die. Magic can do a lot of crazy things if you know how to use it, including creating a clone of yourself. That was a clone? Oh yeah, from a combination of magic and alchemy. They are hard to create and they take ages, but they are so worth it to throw your enemies off. A mischievous chuckle escaped Gardner's lips before he continued. I happen to have one for such an occasion like this, so I took it out and used it to fake my own death, thus throwing them off. But why? Asked Eddy. At this point, there were enough questions flowing through Eddy's head that it felt like there was a whirlwind inside of it. Let me start from the beginning. You have heard the reports of people disappearing. Remembering such a thing unnerved Eddy. Yeah, why? Well, I've been hard at work trying to uncover the truth. Here's what I figured out. Someone out there is using demons to abduct people. Eddy felt a cold chill run down his spine. Demons. They exist in the spirit world, much like Artie and Ellen. I take it Artie hasn't explained what demons are yet. Eddy shook his head. No, but he did say that's one of the things you deal with. Amongst other things. But that's not important right now. Let me tell you about them. Demons are creatures of the spirit world, just like spirits. But unlike their counterparts, they're evil. Like how spirits are drawn to the passion and goodness of the human heart, demons are drawn to the darkness. And somebody out there is using them. Who? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I've been doing my best, but it's been frustrating because the abductions are happening at complete random. meaning it's impossible to predict who's going to be next. And to make matters worse, they've been vanishing without a trace. I've been looking into how and why this has been happening, but somehow they found me first. What happened? I was going home after school. I was in the spirit world, using my powers to fly back home. But then suddenly, I sensed something. As a mage, one of my talents is being able to sense magic, including the dark arts. At first I thought that maybe it was a lingering demon hiding in the shadows. But as I got closer, I realized it was coming right for me. The assailant lunged out of the shadows and took a swing at me with a giant scythe. I used my magic to dodge out of the way. I tried taking a good look at him, but his entire body was covered from head to toe in black, including a black mask that obscured his whole face. Eddy instantly remembered the dark figure from the window. It was the same person. I readied my magics to fight him, but instead this wormy little creature with one eye and a mouth spoke for him. It said they knew who I was and even called me by my name, John Gardner. They knew who you were. That's right. So much for my secret identity. He said they knew my name and that I'm a teacher aide at school. After that, we got into a fight. I beat him, he fled. But then that's when a thought occurred to me. If they knew who I was, then what else were they capable of? For all I knew, they could attack me anywhere out in the open. They could attack me in the spirit world, in the real world, at school. Or what if they even went after you? A chill of fear spread through Eddy's body. Me? You thought they were going to go after me? Gardner slowly nodded. It was a possibility and a risk I wasn't willing to take. If they already knew who I was, then it was only a matter of time before they found out my weaknesses, if they didn't know them already. Unfortunately, my job comes with a certain degree of paranoia. So I took my clone out, told it to take my place, and sure enough, our hooded friend showed up to do me in personally. And then Gardner took in a deep breath and let out a heavy sigh. His tone changed to a more sympathetic one. I was watching it from a distance. I'm sorry you had to see that. I didn't intend to have you see me die. That was a complete accident. A heavy silence hung in the air. Eddy was at a complete loss of what to say or make of this. So much had happened in such a short amount of time that it was hard for him to keep up with all of it. Are you okay? Not really. I can only imagine. Why don't we change the subject? I have a question for you. Where'd you get that mask? Oh, this? Eddy held up the mask and showed it to him. I found it in a bush on my way back home one day. Huh. You just found it out in the open like that? Aye told me these things are rare. Beyond rare, the owl corrected. And you've had it for about 2 weeks. Yeah, that's right. And you actually put it on? Why? Eddy paused for a moment to think. I don't know, I guess I just wanted to see what it would look like wearing it in the mirror. Mr. Gardner looked both surprised and intrigued. That's interesting. Why? Because that there is a mask from the Wizards Guild. There's a Wizards Guild? That's right. It's the group of people who I work for. They're the ones who dispatched me on this case. It's not just here in Auckland. There are Wizards Guilds all over the world. And here's the reason why it's so surprising you have that mask. Those things don't just work for anybody. You see that little jewel in the middle? Eddy looked down at the jewel embedded in the middle of the mask. Yeah, why? It's a magically enchanted jewel. If the previous user dies, then the jewel flies the mask all the way back to the Mages Guild's headquarters. A terrible jolt of fear struck through Eddy's chest. The previous owner of this mask died? That's the funny thing. That's how it's supposed to work. That's clearly a Wizards Guild jewel in there, so why didn't it just warp itself back to the Wizards Guild headquarters? And there's also another mystery here. The masks themselves have been rigged so that only their user can draw from their power. It's a security measure in case the mask falls into the wrong hands. But I can use it. Exactly. The mask is letting you use it. That can only mean one thing. You've been assigned as its new user. Eddy stared at Mr. Gardner completely bewildered. Seriously? He said anxiously. That's right. There was a long pause between Eddy and Gardner, longer than it actually seemed. And then Eddy blurted out, "No!" Mr. Gardner seemed genuinely surprised by Eddy's response. "Oh, really? Even if it means having cool magical powers?" "Yes, really?" "I thought teenagers your age liked superheroes." "I'm not a superhero!" At this point, Eddy was too flustered to argue. He stormed out of the room, leaving the mask on the table. "Smooth, John," said Alan. I picked up the mask with his talons and flew over to Eddy. "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm going home," Eddy grumbled. He power-walked through the door and left Gardner's house without even saying goodbye. He walked up the stairs and used the button on the bracelet to warp himself back to the entrance. He turned the bracelet back in and walked out. But as soon as he was out in the open, he realized that something was off. The environments were bending and contorting like they were alive. He was still in the spirit world. Ahem! Eddy turned around to see Artie fluttering behind him. He was holding the mask in his talons. Eddy reluctantly took the mask, put it over his face, and used its power to return to the real world. He heard the familiar sounds of the city blending together and began walking back home. "What was that about?" "Nothing," Eddy attempted to deflect. "Do you have any idea what you're passing up here?" "No, and I don't want to know." "You know, Eddy, I don't get you." "What don't you get about me?" "I observe every single student and teacher at school, and I've learned so much about them. I know what their personalities are like. I can tell you what their goals and aspirations in life are. I can even explain some of their weaknesses and insecurities to you. But you've always been a mystery to me, and not just to me, but to all of the other spirits too. Do you want to know why that is?" He stopped at a red traffic light. He pretended to ignore the owl. "It's because you blend into the background and you stay there. You're not just alone, it's like you're content with it. Why?" I's statement forced Eddy to remember why he preferred to stay invisible. The memories of his past came flooding back to him. It's because... He uncomfortably mumbled. He actually did want to give Ari the answer, but for some reason the words just wouldn't come out. It was like he didn't want to say them. He just stood there tight-lipped, facing away from Artie. "Alright, fine. Be that way. Be the mysterious, quiet one. Like how you always are." Artie flew off Eddy's shoulder and disappeared into the sky. Eddy instantly felt the sting of regret. Even though Artie was being sarcastic, he was right. He had no reason to keep his past from him, yet it still felt like a hard decision. He stood there lost in thought for so long that the traffic light turned red, forcing him to wait until it turned green again as the cars drove along the road. As he was waiting, something was watching him. It was a demon disguised as a human. He was acting like a regular person going about his day. He also looked average. He looked like a normal, everyday man wearing a plain white shirt and plain trousers. As he looked at Eddy, a wicked smile spread across his face. He could sense a great amount of anxiety from the boy, coupled with indecisiveness. He was the perfect target. Black smoke that nobody else could see seeped out of his mouth and nostrils. The traffic light turned green. Eddy crossed the street with the creature following him, acting like a completely normal person. The trek back to Eddy's apartment felt longer than it actually was. The entire time he was walking, everything in his mind was slowly sinking in. Wizards were real, demons were real, Mr. Garner was alive and he was a wizard, and he had a mask that gave him superpowers and the mask had chosen him to be its new user. What? His head was swirling with too many thoughts to keep up with. But he had made at least one decision. He was going to tell Artie about his past. It was this nagging feeling he had, almost like a warning. If he didn't tell Artie now, he was going to regret not telling him later. The only downside is that he'd probably have to wait until tomorrow to meet him. He reached his building, took the elevator back up, and walked to his apartment. He opened the door and, to his surprise, found Artie there. He was on the table with his wings lazily spread out. He was also mumbling something. Eddy could barely hear him, but he made out the words, what am I going to say? Artie? Huh? Artie raised his head to look at Eddy. You came back. Artie stood back up on his talons and said, I had a little think and I'm sorry. Clearly I was being too hard on you. If you're really so uncomfortable... No, it's fine, Eddy interrupted. Artie stopped speaking. He looked up at Eddy surprised. You were right. I should have just told you. He sat down at the table. It's kind of a long story. Believe me, I've heard before, said Artie as he straightened up. Eddy breathed in deeply, taking the moment to sum up his courage. Part of him was still nervous about telling this story, but he knew this was the right thing to do. He began. It was because of my mother. After I got my autism diagnosis, when I was little, she thought it would be best if I was homeschooled. But my dad didn't think that was a good idea, and there were actually times when they got into fights over it. I still remember them shouting at each other from my room. It was pretty unpleasant. Eventually, the two of them got a divorce. I ended up with Mum, and, Artie patiently waited for Eddy to continue. She pretty much took over my whole life. She controlled everything I did. She wouldn't let me leave the house without her permission, she wouldn't let me have any friends, and she managed every single little thing in my life. The food I'd eat, the TV I'd watch, when I go to bed, when I get out of bed. And whenever I tried questioning it, she'd just tell me it was for my own good. There were even times when she criticized me if I tried stepping even a little bit outside of her program. It got to the point where I gave up and just did whatever she told me to, because I was afraid of her scolding me. And then Eddy put his hand over his mouth like something was trying to crawl up it. Go on, I said kindly. You're doing great. Eddy took another deep breath and said, she got into a car accident and died. After that, I was sent to live with Dad, and he had me enrolled at an intermediate school. At first, I was kind of looking forward to it. I was going to be going to school. I was going to be around kids my own age. I was actually going to be making friends. But shortly after I got there, I realized something. I knew absolutely nothing about how to make friends. I didn't know how to talk to people, and whenever I try, I just lock up. There was like a million questions flying through my head. What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? What if I say something stupid and everybody laughs at me? I was afraid of embarrassing myself. And is that why you don't have any confidence? Asked Artie. Yes, but there's also another reason. Because I was so alone, it meant that I became the target of bullies. They completely took advantage of how much I sucked at talking to people. They called me rude names, they baited me into saying dumb things, and they somehow found out I'd been living with my mother all my life and made fun of me for being a mother's boy. The worst part was that I just didn't know how to defend myself. And it happened every single day to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I summed up my courage and told the teachers I was getting bullied. I did it, and the bullies got told off for it. At first, I thought I was finally safe, and for a couple of days I was. But then, they just started doing it all over again. The insults, the tricks, the bad mom jokes. I told my dad about it, he told the school about it, and finally it was decided that I was to be taken away from the school. I just wasn't doing well there. I slumped his wings down. It was all coming together. I thought I was never gonna go to school again, but then next year Dad had me enrolled at college. And I remember thinking, maybe I could use this as another opportunity to try making friends again. But as soon as I got there, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't even try anymore without thinking of those horrible memories back at the intermediate school. So I did everything I could to keep myself invisible. Look how well that turned out. He finished his sentence referring to Josh. After Eddy finished his story, he slumped down in his chair. The whole time he'd been talking to Artie, his heart had been beating hard. He felt lightheaded, the bones in his chest felt like they were rattling, and his fingers were shaking. Artie walked over to him, his talons lightly clacking on the wood of the table. He stopped in front of Eddy, looked right up at him and said, "You did good." He stopped in front of Eddy, put his wing on his hand, looked up at him and said, "Thanks for telling me." Eddy looked down at Artie, surprised. "Oh, okay, so, you're not going to, judge you?" "Yeah." "What's there to judge? I've heard countless stories like yours, so I know how hard it is to open up like that. That was very brave of you." A light smile spread across Eddy's face. He had never felt more relieved in his life. It was like having a weight lifted from his shoulders. "Thanks, Artie." A little bit later, Dad came back home from work and found Eddy sitting on the couch watching some TV on Netflix. "Oh, you're out of your room, Eddy," he said, surprised. Eddy paused the show he was watching, turned around and said, "Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better now. And I think I'm ready to go back to school." Dad smiled, feeling relieved that Eddy was okay now. He walked over to the kitchen, opened up the dishwasher, and found it empty this time. He'd actually remembered the chore. Eddy was walking back to school. He was still unsure over whether or not he wanted to answer the mask's call or not. He also knew that Artie was going to bring it up as soon as he got back to school. It had actually become part of his routine now. He'd get to school, Artie would fly on his shoulder, and they'd spend the day together. He walked along his usual path, the leaves of the trees crunching beneath his feet. Eddie. Eddie stopped, hearing Artie's voice in the air. He looked all around himself for the owl, but couldn't see him anywhere. All he saw were trees lined up on both sides of the pathway. Artie? He called out, trying to find him. Eddie, you have to... Artie's voice trailed off. Eddie looked all around trying to find him, but couldn't see him anywhere. He presumed it was just a prank from another spirit and got back to walking. But then he realized something. He didn't have his school bag. Oh no, he murmured anxiously. That bag had everything he needed for school. His books, his stationery, his PE shorts, everything. Suddenly he began to panic. Too many thoughts flew through his head at once. He literally wouldn't be able to do anything without that bag. He turned back around, intending to go home and collect his bag, only to realize that the path behind him was gone, replaced with a wall of trees. What? He blurted out. He turned around again back to the pathway, only to realize that was gone too. That was when he finally realized it. It was like snapping out of a trance. He was on his usual walk to school, but the trees were not part of that path. In fact, he wasn't even on his usual path anymore. He was in a forest. Run! Eddie heard the faint sound of Artie's voice again. Artie? He called out nervously. Suddenly the forest started becoming darker. The colors, which had started off nice, warm and bright, slowly began to fade. In almost an instant, the blue sky had turned pitch black. It was night without any stars, just an empty void of darkness. Eddie could barely see anything around him anymore. The forest now looked dark, eerily creepy, and frightening, like something could jump out at him at any moment. Eddie, run! Artie's muffled voice said again. Artie, where are you? What's going on? Eddie shouted at the air, hoping for an answer. Suddenly, a sinister, inhuman voice echoed throughout the forest. Come closer. Eddie's blood ran cold upon hearing it. He almost didn't want to turn around, but he forced himself to look in the direction the voice was coming from. He could vaguely make out something moving behind the trees, accompanied by a loud stomping sound. Run! Artie's voice yelled at Eddie. Heeding the warning, he turned around and fled from the monster. Behind him, he heard the stomping and crashing of the monster's claws as it pursued him. He could actually hear them slicing through the trees. He was so terrified that he wasn't even thinking anymore. He just wanted to get away from the creature. He could barely see through the darkness and almost ran into the trees a few times. Suddenly, he tripped on a vine and fell down to the ground. He could feel the cold dirt and dead leaves stick to his body. Leaving so soon? You've only just gotten here, called out the creepy, monstrous voice. Eddie turned around to see a pair of faintly glowing pale eyes staring down at him. He tried pushing himself away on his arms and legs, only to come up against a large tree. He looked back at the creature in complete and utter fear and terror, too afraid to even scream for help. No way out. No escape. The arm of the monster reached out of the darkness. Its skin looked like it was pitch black, making it blend into the darkness of the background. And it had 5 sharp-looking claws on its deformed hand. As it reached for Eddie, almost against his will, he shouted, "Somebody please help me!" Suddenly, something rushed by Eddie and snatched him up before the monster could grab him. What? The monster angrily shouted. It watched as what looked like a cloak zoomed away from it. Get back here! It shouted as it gave chase. Eddy didn't know where he was or what was happening. One second he was standing up against a tree, and then suddenly he felt like he was wrapped up in a leather cloak. The next second the cloak unwrapped itself around him, and standing in front of him was none other than the Spectre. Mr. Gardner? He almost shouted. The mage held his finger up to his mask. Shh, he hissed. Don't call me by that name when we're here. Oh, sorry, Spectre, Eddy corrected himself. That's better. How did you find me? Artie told me. The Spectre cocked his head over towards Artie, who was fluttering just next to both of them. He landed on Spectre's shoulder. Artie! Eddy had never felt more happy to see him in his life. What's going on? The owl wasted no time giving Eddy his answer. It's bad. Your mind has been invaded by a demon. Eddy put his hands on the sides of his head. Wait, what? We think it might be one of the demons abducting people, said Spectre. This place is a nightmare created in your mind, said Artie. Luckily, Artie over here told me about it as soon as he could, said Spectre. I would have told you myself, but I couldn't get inside this place. I needed Spectre's help. Eddy finally began to calm down a little. Thanks, he said to both of them. Spectre then said, Now then, first things first, we need to get you to safety. Artie flew off Spectre's shoulder and landed on Eddy's. Spectre then turned to Eddy and told him, I want you to follow Artie. He's going to take you out of the nightmare. Okay, but what about you? Said Eddy nervously. I'll stay here and fight it. With any luck, I might be able to get some information out of it. If not, I'll just resort to killing it. Wait, why can't you come with us? Because if I come with you, the demon will eventually find us. Your safety is our top priority right now, and if I fight here, that'll distract it from you. Eddy reluctantly nodded and said, Okay. He only just got Mr. Gardner back, and now there was a chance he could lose him again. But he knew this was the best thing to do. One more thing, said Spectre. He took out Eddy's mask and handed it to him. You'll need this to get out of the nightmare, he said as Eddy took the mask. Artie will tell you how it works. Eddy watched as Spectre floated up into the air and flew back into the dark forest. He'll be fine, said Artie. Now follow me. Eddy did as he was told and followed Artie as he flew out in front of him. The owl's emerald feathers had a light glow that was just enough for Eddy to see him. Even though Eddy was sure Mr. Gardner was going to be okay, he still couldn't help but feel worried for him. As he power-walked through the dark forest, he looked down at the mask and wondered what Spectre meant when he told him that he needed it.